During family dinner, my father engaged his protege. "You're weak," he said, until the armed call hit our block in the middle of dessert. "My name is Sarah Callahan, and I've always been my father's disappointment. At least, that's what the old man makes a point of reminding me every time we get together." To understand the story I'm about to tell, you need to know a little about Michael Callahan, a man who built his private security empire with the same coldness he used to evaluate those around him. A decorated ex-military man and Gulf War veteran, my father returned home with scars that never fully healed and a worldview divided between the strong and the weak. I grew up in Connecticut, in a mansion that looked more like a barracks. My father turned our home into an unofficial training center. While my schoolmates learned ballet, I learned to shoot accurately. By the age of 12, I could assemble and disassemble an M9 with my eyes closed. "This could save your life one day," he says. He timed me. Unlike my older brother Jack, who followed his father's footsteps straight into the Special Forces, I decided to join the military through the conventional route. I didn't want favors, nor the shadow of the Callahan following me. The look of disappointment my father gave me when I announced my decision over Thanksgiving dinner still haunts me. "Regular infantry? Is this how you want to waste your training?" I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I saw and did things that would change anyone. I learned the true meaning of strength, far beyond my father's limited definition. Strength wasn't just the accuracy of a shot or the speed of a tactical response. It was the ability to maintain your humanity even when everything around you begged you to abandon it. I returned home with the rank of sergeant, a decoration for bravery, and the respect of those under my command. But to Michael Callahan, I was still a disappointment. I hadn't climbed high enough, hadn't reached the potential he'd envisioned for me. And now, we were all gathered for another of those infamous Sunday dinners at the Callahan mansion. The solid oak table was set with my mother, Eleanor's finest English china. A socialite who married a soldier and ended up the wife of a security magnate, Eleanor maintained appearances as if it were her life's work. Jack and his wife, Catherine, pregnant with their first child, sat to my father's left. I took my usual seat on the right, followed by my father's newest protege, Adrian Mills, a former SEAL who now served on the board of Callahan Security. My father raised his glass of red wine, an aged Cabernet that cost more than a regular soldier's monthly salary. "To the family," he toasted, looking directly at Catherine's prominent belly, "and to the future of Callahan Security." We toasted. The silence that followed was broken by the clatter of silverware against porcelain. The tension was palpable. My father, as always, began questioning each of us about our professional lives. "Sarah, I hear you're considering leaving the military," he commented, eyeing me over the rim of his glass. I swallowed hard. My contract was indeed coming to an end, and I was considering not renewing it. The sleepless nights, the nightmares, the constant sound of explosions that haunted me, even in the silence, all of it was wearing me down. But it wasn't something I'd shared with my family yet. "I'm still considering my options, Dad." He meticulously cut a piece of meat. "Perhaps it's time you finally accepted my offer and joined the family business. We have a tactical training position that would be well suited for someone with your limited experience." The condescending tone didn't go unnoticed. Limited, as if 2 shifts in Afghan hell were summer camp. "Actually," Jack interjected, always trying to ease the tension, "Sarah's been asked to lead an elite team. Isn't that what you told me, sis?" I gave him a grateful look, even though I knew the benevolent lie would only serve to draw more scrutiny from my father. "Really?" My father arched an eyebrow. Interesting that such an invitation didn't reach my ears. "Not everything flies under your radar, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He smiled, that cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should." It was at that moment that he turned to Adrian, who had remained silent and observing our dysfunctional family dynamics with clinical interest. "Adrian is about to land the largest contract in Callahan Security's history," my father announced, "a partnership with the federal government for counter-terrorism training. This will catapult our company to a whole new level." Adrian nodded modestly, but I could see the glint of pride in his eyes. "It's not finished yet, sir, but the prospects are promising." Modesty is a virtue only when you've already proven yourself, Adrian. You've already done that, so you can brag. My father patted him on the shoulder. This boy has more courage in his little finger than many soldiers I know. The comment was directed at me, of course. How's the volunteer work with the veterans going, Sarah? My mother asked, trying to change the subject. Before I could answer, my father interrupted. Social work. Is that what the American military is producing, these soldiers who need hugs and talks about feelings? I clenched my fists under the table. The work I did with veterans with PTSD was one of the few things that gave me purpose, helping those who, like me, returned with invisible but painful scars. Someone needs to clean up the mess you and your military contractor friends create, Dad, I replied, unable to contain the venom in my words. The table fell silent. My mother choked on her wine. Jack closed his eyes, anticipating the storm. Careful, Sarah, my father said, his voice dangerously low. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. While you profit from wars, I hold the hand of men and women who gave everything for their country and were discarded when they were no longer of use. People your company wouldn't even consider hiring because they are damaged. My father slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes shake. Enough! That's what pisses me off about you, Sarah. You're weak. Always have been. Your emotional, limited vision is exactly why you'll never get far. Look at Adrian here. He understands the world as it really is. No sentimentality, no liberal whining about war victims. Adrian looked uncomfortable, caught in the crossfire of our family dispute. With all due respect, sir, he said cautiously, I think Sarah's work has its value. Not everyone is cut out for the battlefield, but everyone has their role. That infuriated me even more. The condescension in Adrian's voice, as if my job were a minor occupation for those who couldn't handle real military life. He was just repeating my father's speech in a more palatable form. That's why I'm hiring Adrian as the company's new CO2, my father announced, to the surprise of everyone at the table, including Adrian himself. He has the strength and vision Callahan's security needs for the future. The Q position was something that, at least in theory, would be reserved for me or Jack. It was the first step toward eventually taking over the company when my father retired. And now, he was handing it over to a stranger. Here's to Adrian Mills, my father raised his glass, the son I never had. Jack choked on his wine, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. Even he, the perfect son, wasn't good enough. Father, Catherine interjected, her voice shaking with indignation. That was unnecessary. The truth is never unnecessary, my father replied. Adrian has the coldness that Jack doesn't possess, and the strength that Sarah will never have. It's a simple fact. Then dessert arrived. An elaborate apple pie with homemade vanilla. Ice cream, the specialty of Dora, our housekeeper for over 20 years. The moment should have eased the tension, but anger still pulsed through my veins. I watched Adrian, with his embarrassed but satisfied smile, savoring not only the dessert, but also his new status as my father's favorite. And then, the sound. A sound I knew all too well. The distant but unmistakable crack of automatic gunfire. My body reacted before my brain could fully process what was happening. Years of training and real-world experience made me jump out of my chair and scream, "Everyone on the ground, now?" I'd barely finished speaking when the dining room windows exploded, shards of glass flying across the room. My mother screamed. Catherine was pulled under the table by Jack. Adrian seemed paralyzed. And my father? My father looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't fear. Michael Callahan didn't know fear. It was ... surprise. More gunshots. Closer now. Crouching, I crept to the side wall where the panel I knew hid my father's private arsenal stood. A paranoia that now felt like foresight. Dad, the code! I screamed, as a fresh burst of bullets hit the outside wall of the house. He seemed to wake up from a trance. 7, 4, 1, 9, 8, 2. The panel opened with a soft click, revealing an impressive collection of weapons. I grabbed 2 Glock pistols, quickly checking that they were loaded. Jack, protect Catherine and her mother. Take them to the basement bunker, I ordered naturally, taking command of the situation. Dad, you and Adrian grab the weapons and cover the back end. I'll check the front. Surprisingly, my father didn't object to my orders. He grabbed a tactical rifle and signaled for Adrian to do the same. Adrian seemed to have lost all the confidence he'd displayed just minutes before. I have nearest window, keeping my body out of the line of sight of potential shooters. The sound of vehicles skidding reached my ear. At least 3 black SUVs had stopped in front of our house, and masked men armed with assault rifles were strategically positioning themselves around the property. Professionals, I muttered to myself. This was no ordinary assault. These men moved with military precision. This was a coordinated attack. Father, I called, keeping my voice low. I think they're mercenaries, tactical movement, top-notch equipment. This isn't a random raid. My father came to my side, his face a mask of concentration. How many? At least 8 visible. Probably more. He nodded, processing the information. Do you recognize any patterns? Any insignia? I adjusted my position to get a better view. Nothing. Black clothes, balaclavas, no identification, but the way they moved, they looked trained. One of the men shouted something in a language I instantly recognized. Farsi, the language spoken in Iran and by many in Afghanistan. I think I know who they are, my father said, his face suddenly pale. The Iranian contract from 2018. What Iranian contract? I asked, confused. There's no time for explanations, he snapped. We need to hold this position until the company response team arrive. I activated the silent alarm when the first shots were fired. They should be here in 15 minutes. 15 minutes could be an eternity in a combat situation. We both knew that. Where's Adrian? I asked, noticing his absence. My father looked around, irritation evident on his face. Probably hiding somewhere. So much for being a fearless. The first intruder entered through the broken-down front door. Without hesitation, I fired twice. The man fell. I felt nothing but clinical calm. I was back on the battlefield, where my emotions shut down and my instincts took over. My father also fired, taking down another intruder who was trying to enter. Through the side window, we were in a precarious defensive position, but we had the advantage of knowing the terrain. Sarah, my father said, as he reloaded his rifle, you were always the best shot in the family. The comment, at any other time, would have surprised me. Now, it was merely relevant tactical information. Cover, I replied simply, indicating that he should create a distraction so I could reposition myself at a better angle. He understood immediately, firing a series of shots. That forced the invaders to retreat momentarily. I seized the opportunity to crouch down the side corridor, which would give me a line of sight into the garden where several attackers were approaching. It was then that I saw Adrian. He wasn't hiding, as my father had assumed. He was outside, talking to one of the invaders, not as a hostage, as an accomplice. Traitor, I whispered, cold anger replacing the initial shock. I aimed carefully but didn't fire. I needed information, and Adrian alive was worth more than Adrian dead. I crawled back to where my father was. Father, he said, keeping his voice controlled, Adrian is with them. His eyes widened, first with disbelief, then with a fury I had never seen before. He is sure? Absolutely. He's outside talking to what appears to be their leader. My father closed his eyes for a second, processing the betrayal. When he opened them again, there was a steely resolve in them. The only way we're getting out of here alive is if we can. Get to the bunker! There's a tunnel that leads to the neighboring property. Adrian? Leave him to me, my father replied, with a coldness that chilled me. More gunfire, now coming from multiple directions. They were trying to corner us. We needed to move, and fast. Go to the basement and protect your mother and Catherine, my father ordered. I'll deal with Adrian, and then I'll meet you. Negative, I replied firmly. I won't leave you alone. We both know your chances of survival increase. If we stick together. He seemed about to argue, but another explosion, this time coming from the kitchen, cut short any further discussion. The house was being systematically invaded. We have to go, now, I insisted. Reluctantly, my father nodded. We began strategically retreating toward the basement entrance, alternating our cover. An intruder appeared in the hallway ahead of us. I fired without hesitation, hitting him in the chest. When we reached the basement door, my father stopped. You, go on ahead. I'll make sure no one follows us. Dad, this is suicide. That's an order, Sergeant, he said, using my rank for the first time. Protect your mother and Catherine. and the baby. They are the future of the Callahan family. Before I could protest, he pushed me through the door and closed it, turning the lock from the outside. "Dad!" I yelled, banging on the door, but I knew he wouldn't back down. I ran downstairs, finding Jack, my mother, and Catherine already inside the bunker, a heavily armored room in the center of the basement. Jack had a distressed expression on his face. "Where's Dad?" he asked. "He stayed behind," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "Adrian is a traitor. He's with the invaders." Jack paled. "What?" "We don't have time for explanations. We need to follow evacuation protocol." The bunker had several days' worth of supplies and a separate communications system. I activated the emergency radio, contacting Callahan Security's security center. "This is Sarah Callahan, code red at the main residence. Armed raid in progress. Patriarch is engaged, requesting immediate extraction." The reply came immediately. "Received, Callahan. Response team 5 minutes from your location. Hold position. 5 minutes." My father was upstairs, alone, facing a squad of professional mercenaries and a traitor who knew every inch of the house and its defense system. "Jack," I said, turning to my brother, "I need to get back upstairs." "Are you crazy?" "Pfft, is exactly what father didn't want us to do. He'll die if I don't go," I replied, checking the ammunition in my pistols. "You stay here and protect Mother and Catherine." Jack hesitated, clearly torn between his duty to protect his pregnant wife and his desire to help our father. In the end, he nodded resignedly. "You are always the best fighter among us," he admitted. "Open the door for me and close it immediately afterward," I instructed, mentally preparing myself for what would be waiting for me upstairs. When I emerged from the bunker, the sound of gunfire had ceased. The silence was more frightening than the previous noise. I climbed the stairs carefully, every sense on high alert. The house was partially destroyed. Furniture was overturned, windows were shattered, bullet holes were on the walls, and blood, lots of blood. I followed the trail of destruction to the living room where I found my father. He was sitting on his old leather sofa, the same one where he used to tell me war stories when I was a child. His rifle was on the floor a few feet away, and blood was pouring from a wound in his abdomen. "Father!" I ran to him, momentarily forgetting all tactical caution. His eyes opened slowly. "Sarah... I told you to stay in the bunker. Since when do I obey orders?" I tried to joke as I examined his wound. "It was serious. Where are the invaders? They left... They got what they wanted. And what was it?" "The access codes to the company's confidential files." He coughed, a trickle of blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Adrian was an undercover Iranian agent, working to avenge the 2018 operation. "What operation, Dad?" I insisted, tearing a piece of my shirt to make a makeshift bandage. "Something that shouldn't have happened." His breathing was getting harder. "Sarah, listen... You were right about everything." I pressed the cloth against his wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Don't talk. Conserve energy. The extraction team is coming." He held my hand with surprising strength for someone so badly injured. "No, I need you to understand. I was wrong about you. About strength." Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. "This isn't the time for this, Dad. It's exactly the time," he insisted. "I saw how you acted today, without hesitation, without fear, but also without losing your humanity." I heard the sound of helicopters approaching. The extraction team had arrived. "Hang in there, Dad. We're going to get you out of here." He smiled weakly. "The company's yours now, Sarah. Not Jack's, not Adrian's, yours. You have what it takes. The balance I never had. We'll both run the company together, Dad," I promised, knowing it was unlikely. "Now, be quiet and conserve energy." The doors banged open, and men in uniforms bearing the Callahan security logo burst into the room. The paramedic on staff rushed over, taking over my father's care. "Weak pulse, significant blood loss. We need to evacuate him immediately," he announced as his colleagues prepared an emergency stretcher. "Go get the others from the bunker," I instructed one of the security guards. "My brother, my mother, and a pregnant woman. Top priority." The man nodded and ran off towards the basement. As I watched my father's transfer to the medical helicopter, my mind processed everything that had happened. In just a few minutes, my life had completely changed. The man who had always considered me weak now entrusted me with his legacy. The protégé in whom he had placed so much trust had betrayed everything our family stood for, and I, the disappointing daughter, was now at the center of a web of lies, secrets, and violence that spanned continents and decades. In the helicopter, I held my father's hand as the doctor worked frantically to stabilize him. His eyes met mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before: pride. "You were never weak, Sarah," he whispered, barely audible over the roar of the engine. "You were, always, the strongest of us all." Those were his last words before he lost consciousness. The heart monitor began to emit an alarming sound, and the doctor shouted orders as he tried to resuscitate him. I just watched, a strange detachment taking over me. The soldier in me knew some battles couldn't be won. The daughter in me refused to accept it. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The hospital, the doctors leaving the operating room with grim expression, my mother collapsing in Jack's arms, Catherine crying silently, and there I was, standing rigid like the soldier I was trained to be, receiving the news that my father, Michael Callahan, had succumbed to his injury. The next morning, still wearing the blood-stained clothes from the night before, I walked into the main office of Callahan Security. The employees looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. News of the founder's death and the attack on the mansion had already spread. I headed to the main meeting room, where the executive board was already in emergency session. When I entered, all conversations, Roger Dempsey, my father's CFO and longtime friend, stood up. "Sarah, we deeply regret your loss, but this meeting is for senior executives and board members only." I pulled my father's access card from my pocket, which I had retrieved from his belongings at the hospital. "My father named me his successor last night, before he died. I am taking over the company, effective immediately." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Roger looked shocked. "That's unexpected." "No offense, Sarah, but you have no corporate experience. And then there's the matter of your brother, who's already on the board." "Jack supports my decision," I replied firmly. "And as for experience, I've learned from the best. Michael Callahan wouldn't give me this responsibility if he didn't believe I could handle it." I walked to the head of the table, the place that had always belonged to my father. "Gentlemen, madam," I nodded to the only woman on the board. "Callahan Security was attacked yesterday. Not just physically, but fundamentally. A traitor infiltrated our ranks. Confidential documents were compromised. And this is all related to a 2018 operation in Iran, about which, curiously, there is no official record now filed." The silence in the room was palpable. Some executives avoided my gaze. "Starting today, we will conduct a full investigation into all of the company's operations. Over the past 10 years, any illegal, unethical, or national security compromising activity will be exposed, and those responsible will be held accountable for their actions." Roger stood up again, visibly disturbed. "Sarah, you're talking about unearthing the past of the company your own father built. Some corporate decisions are ... complicated." Michael understood that. "My father died yesterday because of these complicated decisions, Roger. And now, I'm in charge. If anyone here has objections, the door is open." Nobody moved. While I continued, "Our first priority is to find Adrian. I want to know everything about him, where he came from, who recruited him, what information he had access to. Second, we need to strengthen our internal security and alert all our government clients of potential compromises. And third, I want a full report on Operation Tehran 2018 on my desk by the end of the day." The meeting proceeded with an intensity that would have made my father proud. When it finally ended 3 hours later, I had a much better understanding of the empire I now commanded, and the skeletons it hid its closet. Roger walked me to what would now be my office. "Sarah," he said, closing the door behind him, "there are things about your father and this company that you need to know. Things that can't be discussed in a board meeting." I sat in the chair that had belonged to my father for decades. It was too big for, but that was just a matter of perception. "I'm listening. The operation in Iran ... sanctioned by the American government. It was a private contract with certain elements of the Saudi government. It involved the elimination of Iranian nuclear scientists. I felt my blood run cold. Murders? Roger nodded uncomfortably. Your father called it preserving global security. The Saudis paid a fortune, and it was all done so discreetly that not even the CIA knew it was us. Until now, I added, understanding the magnitude of the problem. So far, Roger agreed. Adrian must have been planted by the Iranians specifically to avenge this operation. He's probably being hailed as a hero in Tehran right now. I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. My father, the man who criticized my moral weakness, had authorized extrajudicial killings for corporate profit. The irony was not lost on me. Who else was involved in this operation? I asked. Roger looked away. I don't have all the details. Your father kept a lot of things compartmentalized for safety's sake. I didn't entirely believe him, but I decided not to press him for now. What about the documents Adrian stole? What exactly did he get? We're still evaluating, but it appears he accessed files on all our Middle East operations over the past 5 years. Names of agents, locations of secret bases, details of confidential contracts with allied governments, ... double quotes, a national security disaster, he concludes. Exactly. The Pentagon has already been in touch. They're sending a team to assess the damage. I stood, unable to sit still any longer. The enormity of the situation weighed on my shoulders like a rain-soaked bulletproof vest. Roger, the more I discover, the less I recognize the company my father built. Your father was a complicated man, Sarah. He did what he believed was necessary in a dangerous world. He called me weak because I refused to cross certain lines, I commented, more to myself than to Roger, and in the end, he recognized that was his greatest strength. Roger replied softly. I've never seen him so shaken as when Jack told me about how you came back from Afghanistan, how you managed to maintain your humanity amidst hell. Michael was brilliant at many things, but keeping his moral compass intact wasn't one of them. I stared at the city view through the picture window. Washington, D.C., stretched out before me, the capital visible in the distance. What would you do, Roger, if you were in my shoes? He hesitated. Do you want my honest opinion, or the answer I think you want to hear? Honesty. Always. I would bury the past. I would focus on strengthening homeland security, yes, but I wouldn't dig up the skeletons in the closet. There are important government contracts at stake, relationships with foreign allies that could be compromised. Callahan's security employs over 5,000 people. Your future is in your hands. I nodded, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Thank you for your honesty, Roger. I will consider it carefully. When he left, I allowed myself a moment of weakness. I sat back down in the oversized chair, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. My father dead, an international conspiracy, an empire built on moral quicksand now under my command. I opened the top drawer of my desk and found a small picture frame my father kept hidden. It was a photo of me at my army graduation, smiling in my uniform. I hadn't known he kept this photo. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was a blocked number. Callahan? I answered, using the same professional tone my father always used. Sarah Callahan? The voice was male, with a thick Persian accent. My condolences on your father's death. My whole body tensed. Who is it? A friend of Adrian Mills. Or should I say, Amir Maleki, Adrian, or whatever his real name was. What do you want? I asked, keeping my voice steady as I gestured frantically to my assistant. Outside the office, signaling to screen the call. Just talking. You're an interesting surprise, Sergeant Callahan. We didn't expect you to take over the company. Don't tell me. Indeed. Our plan was to eliminate your father and let the internal chaos do the rest. Adrian Amir told us your brother lacked the strength to lead, and you had no interest in the family business. I kept him talking while the security technician who had silently entered worked to trace the call. And now, your plan have been foiled. On the contrary, this might work even better. You have an interesting reputation, Sarah. Your reluctance to accept your father's methods was well known among your fellow soldiers. I froze. How did he know that? We have more sources within your precious American military than you realize, he continued, as if reading my thoughts. We know you've spent the last few years trying to atone for the sins of your country and your father, helping traumatized veterans, building schools in villages your country bombed. taking up the cause of the weak and oppressed? You don't know anything about me, I retorted, though his words struck closer to the truth than I cared to admit. I know enough to make an offer. The documents Amir obtained are only a fraction of what we have. Evidence of war crimes authorized by his father, assassinations on American soil, bribery of foreign officials, all documented, all traceable to Callahan's security and its founder. The security technician signaled that he had an approximate location, Baku, Azerbaijan, a neighboring country of Iran. And what do you suggest I do with this information? I asked, stalling for time. Nothing. We won't do anything to her. If you cooperate. Cooperate how? We want access. Certain Callahan operations in the Persian Gulf that harm our interests. Information about American military installations. Nothing that directly compromises American lives, just balance of power. I laughed humorlessly. You want me to become a spy for Iran? I prefer the term unofficial consultant. And yes, precisely that. What if I refuse? Then we release all the information we have. Your company collapses. Your father's legacy is destroyed. Thousands of employees lose their jobs, and you end up being investigated as an accomplice. I remained calm, even though my heart was racing. I need time to think. Of course, you have 48 hours. I'll call again. The call has been terminated. The security technician looked at me, pale. Ma'am, we need to report this to the intelligence agencies immediately. Not yet, I replied, thinking quickly. First, we need to understand the extent of the infiltration. If they have sources within the military, they might have sources within the CIA or FBI as well. I needed someone I could absolutely trust, someone outside the official circle. I picked up my personal phone and called a number I rarely use. Martinez, the husky female voice, answered after 3 rings. Ramirez, this is Sarah Callahan. Remember Kandahar? A brief silence. How could I forget? You saved my life. I need your help now. It's confidential. I can't use official channels. What happened? Her voice immediately became alert. I can't talk on the phone. How long does it take you to get to DC? I'm in Fort Bragg. I can catch a flight in 2 hours. Do it. I'll meet you at the usual place. Understood. And Sarah, I am sorry about your father. I heard it. On the news. Thank you, I replied before hanging up. The security technician looked at me with a confused expression. Ma'am? What's the plan? The plan is that I don't trust anyone except those who have proven their loyalty with blood, I replied, grabbing my coat. Continue analyzing the compromised documents. I want to know exactly what they have. And where are you going? I have a meeting with someone who can help me hunt down a traitor. Our usual spot was a small Vietnamese cafe in the Columbia Heights neighborhood, where Alina Martinez and I used to hang out when we were both stationed in D. Alina was a military intelligence specialist who served with me in Afghanistan. We met during an attack on our base in Kandahar when I pulled her from a burning building after she was wounded. Since then, we've maintained a quiet friendship based on mutual respect and absolute trust. I arrived an hour before the scheduled time, carefully checking out the place. Old habits die hard. I chose a table in the back with a view of the door and an emergency exit within easy reach. Alina arrived promptly at 6 p.m. She still wore her black hair cut short in a military style, but she was in civilian clothes, jeans, boots, and a leather jacket. Her dark eyes automatically scanned the cafe before settling on. A small smile played across her lips as she approached. Sergeant, she greeted, sitting down across from me. Captain, I replied, noting her recent promotion. Thank you for coming so quickly. For you, Sarah. I'd come from hell if I had to. She signaled to the waiter, ordering a black coffee. After he walked away, his face became serious. What's going on? In a low voice, I recounted the events of the past 24 hours. The dinner, the attack, my father's death, Adrian's betrayal, and the mysterious call. Alina listened without interrupting, her face a mask of professional concentration. So they want you to be a mole, she concluded when I finished. Classic. The question is, what do they really have? How much of what this man said is true and how much is bluff? Elinot took a sip of her coffee. Based on your description of the Iran operation, I'd say you're not bluffing. There were rumors in intelligence circles about a series of accidents involving Iranian nuclear scientists a few years ago. Officially, no one in the American government knew who was behind them. Unofficially, ... Well, some suspected an Israeli or Saudi operation, but not American, not directly. But if Callahan Security was involved, ... She let the sentence hang, heavy implications hanging between us. How bad would this be if it came to light? Elena considered the question carefully. Geopolitically? Explosive. It would confirm what the Iranian government has been claiming for years, that the U.S. is waging an undeclared war against them. Legally for the company? Catastrophic. Violation of the Neutrality Act, extrajudicial killings, unauthorized action on foreign territory. The list goes on. I ran my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the situation. What about me? If I refuse to cooperate and they release this information, ... double quotes, you could argue that you didn't know any of this, which is true. But as the current CEO and daughter of the founder, she grimaced. It wouldn't be pretty. At the very least, years of legal battles and the complete destruction of the company and your family's reputation. What if I pretend to cooperate to buy time? Elena tilted her head thoughtfully. Possible, but extremely risky. They'll probably ask for proof of good faith, some valuable information right away. And when they find out you're stalling, the retaliation will be even worse. I need to find Adrian, I decided. He's the key to all of this. He knows exactly what was compromised and can lead it back to his handlers. Find a trained Iranian agent who is likely under the protection of their intelligence service on foreign soil? Elena raised her eyebrows. That's practically impossible without official resources. Then we will use official resources, but with extreme caution. Do you still have contacts at DIA who are absolutely trustworthy? The Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, was less well known than the CIA, but equally effective. Elena thought for a moment. I have one. My old commanding officer, Colonel David Harmon. He owes me for Bosnia. Can you contact him discreetly? She nodded. I can. But Sarah, even with DIA's help, finding Adrian will be like looking for a needle in a global haystack. Maybe not, I replied, an idea forming in my mind. Adrian or Amir, whatever, worked at Callahan Security for almost 3 years. He had an apartment here, friends, a life. No matter how good a spy he is, you can't create an identity that deep without leaving some real fingerprint. What are you thinking? Let's start with the basics. Payroll, taxes, medical record. All the documents he had to provide to work for the company. Somewhere he must have made a mistake, used some truthful information, or left some pattern we can trace. Elena smiled. A predatory smile I knew well from our days on the battlefield. That I can do. In fact, I have a few tools that aren't normally ... officially sanctioned. I preferred not to ask for details. In the meantime, I need to find out more about this Iranian operation and my father's involvement. There are files he kept in a private vault, separate from the company's systems, physical documents that Adrian probably couldn't access. Where is this safe? In the mansion. Or what's left of it? Elena nodded. I'll start my part today. We must keep contact to a minimum to be safe. We'll use the Kabul protocol. The Kabul protocol was our private code for a communications system we had developed during a particularly sensitive operation in Afghanistan. Coded messages left in specific public locations, a modern version of the Cold War's dead boxes. As we said goodbye on the sidewalk outside the cafe, Elena gripped my arm tightly. Sarah, I know this is personal to you. Your father, your company, your name. But remember, when things get personal, we make mistakes. And in our world, ... double quotes, mistakes mean coffins, I added, repeating one of the mantras from our time in service. I know, Elena. I'll keep a cool head. It's good to see you again, Callahan, despite the circumstances. Likewise, Martinez. Careful. I returned to the car with a renewed sense of purpose. I knew what I needed to do. Investigate my father's dark past while hunting down the man who had betrayed him. The cell phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Jack. Where are you? He asked, his voice strained. I've been trying to find you all day. I had to go out and take care of some things, I replied vaguely. What happened? The police are here at the mansion. They have questions about the attack. And the father's lawyer wants to see us tomorrow for the reading of the will. The will. With everything that was going on, I hadn't even thought about it. I'll be there in an hour, I promised. Don't say anything specific to the police until I get there. Sarah, what's really going on? It wasn't just a robbery gone wrong, was it? Not over the phone, Jack. In an hour. When I hung up, I realized I hadn't yet properly processed the fact that my father was dead. I hadn't had time to grieve, to be sad, only to act as I'd always been trained. It was easier, this way, to focus on the mission, to leave the emotions for later. But as I drove back to what remained of my family home, it allowed me to finally feel the weight of loss. Not just of the man, but of the possibilities, of all the conversations we would never have, of the mutual understandings that were just beginning to form when everything was abruptly cut short. You were never weak, Sarah. You were always the strongest of us all. His last words echoed in my mind, a belated recognition that I would now have to sustain for the rest of my life. The Callahan mansion resembled a war zone. Yellow police tape cordoned off the perimeter, and patrol cars with flashing lights were parked at the circular driveway. Reporters crowded the gates, kept at bay by the company's private security guard. I showed my identification to the police officer at the gate, who let me through after checking my name against his list. The damage was even more obvious in the daylight-shattered windows. Bullet-riddled walls, dark bloodstains on the lobby's Italian marble. Jack was waiting for me in the library, one of the few rooms that had escaped relatively unscathed. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a day, dark circles under his eyes, his face pale and drawn. "They're in Father's office," he said, instead of a greeting. "Detectives Bishop and Ramirez, asking questions about possible enemies, recent threats, as if this were a common attack." "What did you tell them?" "That he didn't know anything, that we needed to speak with you and the lawyers before making detailed statements." They didn't seem very pleased. I nodded, grateful for my brother's call. "Where are Mom and Catherine?" "In a hotel. Doctors didn't want Catherine around all that stress, in her condition." "Good." I hesitated before asking, "How are they?" Jack sighed, running his hand through his hair, the same gesture I did when I was stressed. "Little genetic mirrors. Catherine's holding her own. Mom, well, you. No Mom, keeping up appearances in public, falling apart in private." I nodded, understanding perfect. Eleanor Callahan had built her entire life around an image of perfection and control. Even in a tragedy like this, she wouldn't break character in public. "Let's talk to the detectives," I decided. "But I'll take your cue. If I say we can't comment on something, you agree? Understand?" Jack nodded, and we continued on to our father's office. The room was surprisingly intact, almost as if the intruders had deliberately avoided damaging that particular space. The detectives rose as we entered. Bishop was a middle-aged man with graying hair at the temples and shrewd eyes that seemed to assess every detail. Ramirez was younger, a Hispanic woman with a military bearing that made me suspect prior service in the military. "Miss Callahan," Bishop extended his hand. "We are sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I replied automatically, squeezing her hand. "I understand you have questions." "Some, yes. We're trying to understand exactly what happened here last night. From what we can determine, this was no ordinary robbery." "No, it wasn't," I agreed, deciding to give them something to work with without revealing too much. "My father had many enemies, Detective. People who disagreed with his corporate policies, competitors who lost important contracts to Callahan Security. And did any of these enemies have the resources to mount an attack of this magnitude?" Ramirez asked. "Because our experts have identified at least 8 different shooters using cutting-edge military equipment and coordinated assault tactics. This goes beyond a typical corporate vendetta." She was good. I realized we'd have to play it a little more openly to avoid raising suspicion. "Callahan Security is no ordinary company, Ramirez. We provide security services to clients in war zones. This means we sometimes come into conflict with terrorist organizations, drug cartels, and even hostile governments." Bishop arched an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting this was a terrorist attack?" "I'm suggesting that the investigation likely goes beyond the jurisdiction of local law enforcement," I replied diplomatically. "The FBI and possibly intelligence agencies should be involved." "They are," Ramirez commented. "Federal agents are arriving tomorrow." But we still have to do our job, Miss Callahan. And part of that is understanding why a man who owns a highly sophisticated security company was killed in his own home, apparently unable to properly activate his own defense protocols. The implication was clear. Either the security systems had failed, or they had been deliberately disabled. In either case, it suggested an inside job. The systems were compromised by a trusted employee, I admitted, deciding this information would inevitably come to light. Adrian Mills, the company's newly promoted CEO. He disappeared after the attack, and we believe he was working with the attackers. Bishop and Ramirez exchanged glances. We have a bolo for Mills, Bishop said, referring to the Be On Lookout police alert. But so far, nothing. His apartment is empty, his phone is off, no activity on his credit cards or bank accounts. He planned this carefully, I comment. Do you have any idea who might be behind this attack? Ramirez asked directly. Any recent contracts that might have provoked this level of retaliation? I realized what she was doing, trying to get me to reveal information about the company's business dealings that could have motivated the attack. Information that could lead directly to the Iranian operation I had just uncovered. Unfortunately, many Callahan security operations are classified. Even to me, I replied, a half-truth. We are conducting our own internal investigation, and when we have information that could help the official investigation, we will certainly share it. Bishop didn't seem satisfied with the answer, but he nodded. We understand the sensitive nature of your firm's work, Ms. Callahan, but I hope you also understand we are investigating a homicide. Your father was killed on American soil, and it is our job to find those responsible. Completely understandable, and you will have all the cooperation we can offer within the bounds of law and national. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with questions about my father's routine, recent visitors to the mansion, and change in his behavior. I answered as best I could without revealing anything about the true nature of Callahan's security and its more shadowy operations. When the detectives finally left, Jack and I were left alone in our father's office. You know who did this, he said. It wasn't a question. I have a good idea, I replied, careful even with my own brother. Sarah, I'm a board member. If there's something that threatens the company, I need to know. I studied my brother for a moment. Jack had always been the family diplomat, the conciliator, less intense than my father, less stubborn than, but his loyalty to the family was unquestionable. What I'm going to tell you can't leave this room, Jack. Not even Catherine can know. He nodded gravely. Callahan's security was involved in an unsanctioned operation in Iran in 2018, involving eliminations of nuclear scientists. Jack paled visibly. My God, did father authorize this? Apparently, for Saudi clients, not the American government. Adrian, or whatever his real name is, was an Iranian agent specifically placed to avenge this operation and obtain evidence of the company's other illegal activity. And he succeeded. Yes, and now I'm being blackmailed into becoming an Iranian source. If I refuse, they'll leak everything. The company collapses, the father's legacy is destroyed, and we potentially create an international crisis. Jack sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I don't even know what to say. Have you contacted the authorities yet? No. As I explained to the detectives, this goes beyond local law enforcement, and I'm not sure who I can trust in federal agency. Adrian had sources in the military. He may have sources elsewhere as well. So, what's the plan? Find Adrian before the 48 hours are up. Recover the document. Neutralize the threat. Jack looked at me with an expression I couldn't immediately decipher. After a moment, I realized what it was. Fear. Not of the situation, but of myself, of the coldness with which I spoke of neutralizing a threat. Sarah, you're sounding like him. I didn't need to ask who he was. I'm doing what's necessary to protect the family, the company, the people who depend on us. At the expense of what? Of your humanity? Isn't that what you always criticized about your father? His words hit me like a punch in the gut. He was right, of course. I was falling into the same pattern I'd always despised in my father. Cruel pragmatism disguised as necessity. I won't become him, Jack, I promise. More to myself than to him. I'll find a solution that doesn't involve more deaths or ethical compromise. I don't know yet. But there's a difference between being strong and being rude. Father never fully understood that. I do. Jack nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. There's one more thing we need to do here, I said, changing the subject. Father's secret safe. It's hidden behind that painting. I pointed to an oil portrait of our grandfather in World War II military. I didn't even know there was a safe there, Jack commented, surprised. Few knew. Father showed it to me once, years ago, during one of his contingency lessons. He said it contained documents that could make or break the family in times of crisis. I approached the painting, carefully removing it from the wall to reveal a built-in digital safe. I looked at Jack. Any idea of the combination? He shook his head. None. I thought for a moment. My father was a methodical man who rarely left anything to chance. If he'd shown me the safe, it was because he expected I'd need it one day. And if he'd expected that, he'd have chosen a combination I could deduce. I tried your date of birth. Nothing. The company's founding date. Nothing. My mother's date of birth. Jack's. My own. Nothing worked. And then I remembered something. My father always kept a small medallion in his vest pocket. Once, when I asked about it, he simply said it was a memento of the day he discovered his true strength. I never knew what it meant. But the medallion was engraved with a date. November 17th, 1991. I typed the numbers. The 17th of November, 1991. The safe emitted a soft beep and the door opened. How did you know? Jack asked, impressed. Just a guess, I replied as I examined the content. Inside were several folders, an external hard drive, a small black leather notebook, and a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. I picked up the envelope with trembling hand, feeling its weight literal and figurative. It was as if my father were there, watching. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it contained not just paper and ink, but a final fragment of my father's voice. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a few handwritten lines. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I failed in some crucial way. Either I'm dead or incapacitated, and you've been forced to take on responsibilities for which I didn't have time to adequately prepare. The documents in this vault contain both our salvation and our downfall. Use them with the discernment I have always admired in you, even when you pretended otherwise. True strength lies not in the absence of weakness, but in the courage to face it. It took me a lifetime to learn. I hope you don't make the same mistakes. I always knew it would be you in the end. Your father, Michael. I folded the letter slowly, feeling a lump in my throat as Jack waited, respecting my timing. What now? He asked finally. I looked at the folders, the hard drive, the notebook, the complicated legacy my father had left for me to decipher. A legacy stained with blood, built on morally ambiguous decisions, but also on principles of protection and strength. Now, I replied, my voice finding a firmness I hadn't known it possessed. We do what we've always done as a Callahan family. We weather the storm. I picked up the phone, ready to summon a small but loyal team people I could trust, not only with my life, but with something far more precious, my integrity. This would be a mission unlike any other I had faced, not to destroy, but to rebuild. We'll find Adrian, I told Jack, but not like Dad would have. We'll do it my way. As I watched the sunset through my office window, I thought about the last night I saw my father alive, the family dinner that had turned into a nightmare. He had called me weak, but in his final moments, he recognized what I had always known, that my supposed weakness, my insistence on maintaining my humanity even in the darkest moment, was actually my greatest strength. And now, that strength would be tested like never before. Are you ready? I asked Jack, putting the letter in my breast pocket. He nodded, a familiar determination shining in his eye. It was the same look our father had when faced with an impossible challenge. I'm ready, he replied. And so, with the weight of the Callahan Empire on my shoulders and the echo of my father's last words in my ears, I took the first step toward the uncertain future that awaited me, not as the disappointing daughter he once considered me, but as the leader he always knew I could become.